When he called me, he seemed very calm. He acted as though nothing had happened, nothing was wrong. He told me that he was ready to come back to work, that he had cleared his mind, that he felt good for the first time in a long time. And I was listening to this, and here again I was still in a state of shock, but I think I did my best to retain my composure and not let on to him that I had already turned him into authorities.
Now, all this time, they've already put his picture out. It's well known, publicized everywhere that authorities want to talk to him.
I believe so. Here again, I wasn't watching I was in my vehicle in the afternoon, so I wasn't really abreast of what was going on other than the radio news.
Mm-hmm.
But right, I believe at that point they had already published his name, and from the information I'd given them
mm-hmm.
earlier in the morning. So while he was talking to me, he apologized for his past behavior, since he left on the terms that I described, and he said he had been sick and that now he was well and that everything was going to be fine, and said he would like to come back to work, and he said that he had no money, he was desperate for money, and that he would need some money to start working again. So I remained calm, and I pretended as though I was actually happy to hear from him, and that he would be welcome back to work, and that I would be willing to advance him $800 to get started. So I told him I would leave a check for him at the office on Clairmont Rd. We discussed where I would leave it, on the back deck under a sundial. And he told me he was extremely grateful for that, and that I wouldn't regret it, and that he would come by to get it sometime Friday afternoon, Friday evening, or possibly Saturday morning. He told me after he got that money, he would be able to go get a disposable cell phone, and then he would be able to contact me. I asked if there was any way I'd be able to contact him in the meantime, and he said no, absolutely not, but that he would be in touch with me as soon as he possibly could. And then he hung up. That was the end of that conversation. And
how long a conversation?
I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Like I said, it was so startling to me.
I was going to say, what was your reaction when he called? I guess you never would have expected that in a million years.
Oh, of course not. That was the last thing I was expecting. And here again, I'd been fielding a lot of phone calls all afternoon from the GBI and other law enforcement agencies. Just that, whatever questions they might have, I told them they could call me anytime, and they all had my cell phone number. So, like I said, there was a lot going on in my mind, and of course, I wanted to do everything I could to see that he was captured. Even though at the time, I guess there's a part of me that didn't want to believe that someone I knew could commit such a heartless, vicious murder as was committed. But on the other hand, I also knew what I'd been through for the past year, and I knew that there was certainly the potential that he could have done something bad. So I didn't think twice. I, of course, immediately called the GBI as soon as I could locate their phone numbers, and I gave them the number of the payphone that he had called me from, and I told them of my plan to bring him to Atlanta, to the office, to get the check. And then I discussed with the GBI agents, what I should do next, whether I should actually go to the office, should I, leave a check for him, or what should I do? I, of course, had no idea what to do at this point. They advised me not to go anywhere near the office. They told me that the entire area would be put under surveillance, and they would just hope that he showed up there if they weren't able to capture him any sooner. So at that point, I realized if he did go there and get that, or look for that check, and if he somehow managed to elude the authorities, because he was a smart person, he knew how the police operated, and I thought there was only a chance he might be able to get to the office and without being apprehended. And I also thought that if he did that and he drove all the way to Atlanta and there was no check waiting for him, that I would be the next one on his list. So here again, I had to evacuate my house, and I stayed behind, and I literally stayed up all night with an assault rifle waiting to see if he were going to show up.
So you were putting yourself at risk by doing this?
Well, I suppose in hindsight I was, but quite honestly, at the time, that really wasn't even a thought. I mean, I didn't. I wouldn't let fear get in the way of doing the right thing. I didn't have to think twice about it.
This whole time you're going through this, are you thinking this is really strange? I mean, or are you just kind of reacting to everything?
I still feel that as we sit here. I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about this gruesome crime, and that I actually knew this monster that has committed it. It makes me sick to my stomach, and I felt that way since the very moment I contacted the authorities and identified him, and it continues to this day. And as more details come out about possibly other crimes, it just makes me feel even more sick. I just hope that I stopped him. Excuse me.
My next question, do you feel some satisfaction in knowing at least that you got the police on the right trail and did?
Well, I would certainly like to think so. I mean, from the agents that I've talked to, the people that have profiled criminals of this type have all told me the same thing, that apparently once they start this type of murderous crime spree, there's really no stopping them until they're apprehended. So yes, I certainly do feel some satisfaction at the end of the day that he's never to be released to harm the public again, but I also think about the victims, and that's what chokes me up. Of course, I wish there was something I could have done sooner, but I just don't believe there was.
So those 10 years you knew him, everything, he was an odd character, but nothing out of the ordinary until that day in September when things just turned sour. And but I guess even at that point, did you think? I guess you still never, even at that point when he's being threatening, didn't think that he would do something like what he's accused of now.
Well, that's correct, but like I said, the past year he really had changed quite a bit, and he said a lot of things. He did a lot of talking and didn't do much listening. So I just thinking of the things he said along the way and just the way he acted, I knew he was a danger, and I did what I could, all that I thought I could, to try and bring him to the attention of the police. But apparently there was nothing they could do about it.
What do you think changed him?
That's a good question. I wish I knew. One thing that I know he did, as I described earlier, as I discussed earlier, he complained of illness, and I know he started taking prescription drugs, Ritalin in particular, I think in large doses, because there were times he would call and his speech would be so fast and furious I could barely understand what he was saying. It was like he had just had 30 cups of coffee to drink. He was also taking some other medicines I'm not familiar with. And I know at one point he told me that he really needed these medicines because when he stopped taking them, the demons came back. And this type of language I'd never heard from him before. I'm not suggesting that these particular drugs changed him, but that's the only factor I can identify that seemed to change over the years that I knew him. And
that's when the behavior changed anyway, was when he got on these medications.
Yes, around that time. Maybe shortly before, maybe shortly after. I can't pinpoint the dates because here again, I didn't generally see this monster on a daily basis. I rarely saw him in person over the past several years, maybe not more than once a month or so, if that. Most of our dealings would be by telephone. And so I didn't see his physical change, although I remember at one point seeing him with teeth missing, which he had never had that issue before. I believe he told me one of his crowns or a bridge or some dental work had just come loose and fallen out, and he told me that another tooth was decayed, or he had a problem with it, so he told me he actually took a pair of pliers and pulled it out himself.